Welcome to another podcast of the Learning Leadership Society, a professional peer contributor network of American K-12 educators and companies that are committed to advancing the field through communication, collaboration, and partnering. This is your host, LeiLani, CEO of Learning Council News Media and Research, founder of No Story, and Learning Leadership Society coordinator. So our topic for today is the Education Intelligent Network Matrix is already here. So here's the outline that we're going to be talking about today. First of all, I want to introduce my new friend, who is Mike Witzman, the Cisco Senior Director of Solutions Engineering at Cisco U.S. Public Sector. So first of all, Mike, let's have you give a little intro, and then I'm going to dig into kind of what we're going to go through today. Is that okay?
Absolutely. And LeiLani, thank you for having me on the podcast here. I'm excited to talk about education and technology, which are now and forever intertwined. But yeah, just a very little bit about myself. Came through the education system in the U.S. And so, we've all experienced that. So we all have a perspective from that. Have three kids at various stages, one out and two still moving through it in different parts of it. And I started my technology career in the Air Force. So I was in the military here in the U.S. And then I've been at Cisco 24 years working with all manner of organizations. I've worked with healthcare and manufacturing and retail. But as over the last 6 years, I've been working with state, local government, education, and then more recently, our federal government, including all their, manner of, VA and Department of Education and CISA and DHS and all those types of organizations. And so kind of a fully rounded view of the education system at all levels, and really excited to be, continue working with state, local governments, but also now working with federal governments on some of these types of areas.
Okay, wow, that's not a cakewalk that you're telling me that you've been down. So awesome. So let's get into this. So today we want to discuss the fact that education trends sort of indicate that the future is already here. And I want to sort of give that a little context and have you sort of dig into it with me. We're already in a matrix of digital learning. Many schools that haven't realized that yet, and they may not be ready with their networks and their ed tech. But let's frame it into the old saying, form follows function. So there's levels of education, and I'm going to go ahead and share a screen here so people can sort of follow along, but we're going to describe it for our audio listeners. You see those, Mike?
Yes.
Okay, good. So in a special report we just recently did, we talked about the fact that society's kind of moved from really very centralized organizations and very bureaucratic ones to slightly decentralized, where you had all the schools reporting up to districts, reporting to the states, and the feds got involved. But now we're kind of going the opposite direction. We're in a very distributed lay of the land in most businesses. And you're experiencing this in the network side more than any other company, obviously, where you're really looking at the biggest businesses and the biggest organizations in the world are like these giant major networks, and they're sharing, and it's changing the whole structure of how they do things. So a really good example is like, Amazon sort of beat up all of retail, and FedEx for a long time was beating up on the postal service, and Uber sort of used the network to take over what used to be the big taxi industry. So when we look at the matrix and start talking about education, what I mean by we're already here is that education can be sharing not just digital resources in their individual campus, but across to multiple campuses and every other direction. So one of the things that I wanted to have you and I talk about is this one, which is the difference between what is the individual node, the campus, all the way up to the matrix. So let me start first with the fact that practically every student has a device, right? We're at the bottom level of that little staircase there, where most people think in education. And right there, you're a node. You're an individual node in this giant network. A teacher is an individual node. The school is an individual node in the giant network. But down there, there's certain things that have to happen in networks. And I want you to sort of speak to that.
Absolutely. And I want to go back a little ways, because when this really started, and it wasn't that far long ago, when this sort of one-to-one, device initiative got going, technology was additive, but it wasn't necessary, it wasn't critical. So if it was there, even after, schools had adopted this one-to-one, if it wasn't there, that was okay. They could continue on, whatever the curriculum, whatever the classroom, whatever the experience was going to be, could continue on without that. Even where the programs existed. But when we went to the pandemic, then everything had to move online. I mean, the curriculum, the syllabus, the ebooks, the labs, the quizzes, the tests, everything. And anybody who didn't have a one-to-one had to scramble quickly to get that out there so they could just continue the mission of education. But then what happened was everybody brought that stuff back to the classroom and honestly melted networks. That was probably the first thing we saw. And there were a few things we saw, LeiLani, in that time. First was melting networks, right? You needed
It's a very
wireless.
descriptive word, Mike, melting. Yeah, I can just
That's
see it.
and that's what they felt when they were, so we had the scramble to get everybody back. There was actually a scramble when everybody out and enabled. There was a similar scramble when everybody came back in. So the traffic patterns now, you had all these devices, many of which had been on the network, but they weren't reaching out to rich media, with many students doing it all at the same time as they had, but so they're doing that post-pandemic. They hadn't been doing that before. Firewalls had to be upgraded. So there was this traffic change, but then there was also an increase in that criticality. So you think about, if you can't get to that syllabus, if you can't get to that learning management system, if you can't get to the critical education systems, what is the fallback? Often, sometimes for certain elements, some days that might be fine, but some days you may miss that. You may not be able to resequence what you're trying to teach and just jump past that, and I'll move this around and do that. And our educators are very adaptive, very flexible, but you may end up losing, some of that really rich, valuable, and scarce, time that teachers and students get, during any given trimester or semester if the systems aren't there for them. So just the availability, needs went through the roof. The systems just have to be on, they have to be there to keep the education mission going. And then, the third thing that we've really started to learn is to keep the availability of the system, you have to secure it. And part of that's just deploying some of the, common things, network next-gen firewalls, endpoint protection, multi-factor authentication, some other critical controls. It also requires a realization that a perfect defense is never possible. So this idea of resilience comes in. I think when we talk about the matrix in a little bit, I think this idea of resilience is super critical, because it's one thing to have a plan for how things are going to work when everything goes just the way you want it to. And there's a whole nother to how do you adapt to the things that are coming. And so I think that's really the mindset that is there in security today. How do you do backups? We think about in schools, you have hurricane drills, tornado drills. Well, there's also this concept of tabletop exercises, we call them in security, which is the same thing. How do you document and practice your procedures when certain things that are foreseeable, they may not have happened to you yet, but they are foreseeable. They've happened to your peers. They've happened to other people. They're documented and published and known. How do you practice for those types of things? And then the last thing I think that we've needed to put in place to enable, truly enable, I would say, the intelligence in the network to really thrive at that first level is visibility. Because you didn't just exist in the network. You did exist in the one-to-one world. Even before we went to full hybrid and remote, you did exist off of the network. You existed in a lot of places. And so when the criticality came up, so did the visibility need we have now for what's working, what's not. In the old days, I just had to keep my system going, my network, everybody was on it, and we were good. But if I have to come in from home, or I need to access something from home to be ready for the next day, or I'm sitting on the school network and I have to get out to a cloud-based system for anything, any media, material, learning management system, I have to have some accountability. Well, how's all that working? What part's not working, so that I know what to do with that? So now all of a sudden, IT is now accountable, sort of responsible for the internet. I can't make it work, but I need to know how are these things working so that I can use them, not use them, work around them, do other things. And so that visibility becomes really, really, really critical to enable that first level.
Yeah, so we're still here at this first level where everybody pretty much got devices. right? So that created a whole nother level of sophistication, but we want to walk and you talked about the intelligence side of that, but we want to walk everybody up this staircase now of how much more intelligence there is until they can actually sort of be with us a little bit in the matrix. Okay, so the next level up is really the campus or the classroom level. And there's been a lot of new devices that have been hitting that arena. You know, we're still seeing the research saying every year that the interactive whiteboards are just going gangbusters still, and there's a lot more new things being used in classrooms that weren't on the network before. But there's, you know, they're showing video on those, and they're doing all kinds of other things. They've got robots hitting the network. They've even got drones hitting the network. They've got everything. And so it's almost like, yeah, we went down here at step one, the individual or having a device and the node, but now they probably have 2 or 3 devices, right? Every student,
Yes.
they have their laptop, their iPad and their phone hitting the networks. And then in the classroom, we've got even more. So let's talk more about this whole thing going on in the classroom and the campus. Go ahead.
Yeah, and if we could we just go back and have 3D printers and drones when we went to school? Could we? I guess we can't.
It was so much
We,
easier.
we don't get to do that. I just toys. I'm an engineer at heart, and so I want those things, and just having those in those environments. Going to my kids' schools and seeing the libraries turn into maker spaces. You know, those types of trends. I absolutely love to see that. So first, I do want to say there is tremendous value in the physical spaces of the schools. You know, we talked about the student, right? And we want everything to be student centered, but the physical space, I mean, I think another thing we learned in the pandemic is the structure of a school day matters, especially the younger a student is, but even at all ages, there's something about that structure and that rhythm that we lost in that space. But then the actual physical spaces, you know, from the classroom to the halls, the stages, the gyms, the lunchrooms and all those places, they foster collaboration and interaction, and you know, and that's important. It's important that these are safe spaces, right? And I think we have a slide on this, LeiLani. You know, from whether it's the air, water, temperature, quality, to their physical safety, and what's important, I think, there is the same infrastructure that we're using for these, you know, the academic purposes. Like, you know, I think to the eclipse that just happened, you know, here recently, you know, we're, you know, sending that,
which was awesome.
It was incredible, and it was streamed into classrooms. I didn't even think of this for young kids, because how do you trust that a young student is going to keep their glasses on, and one teacher for however many students is going to, you can't do it. So you have them in the room, and they watch it on that. That's great. What about all the schools who aren't in the path of the total eclipse? You stream it to them. So we have that, right? So we've talked about that in kind of the node part. We've got that ability to deliver that to the classroom or to the individual. But that same network should be integrated with building controls. You know, it should be integrated with the safety, you know, locks and the doors and the notification systems and all the things, you know, that tie into the building being a safe place for learning and for education. And for schools, you know, the capital budgets are limited, the staffs are always limited. And so the value is when you can build one network where everything is there and integrated, you only have to build once, maintain once, and secure once. So the more, you know, the security becomes a thing, more networks I have, the more I have to try to secure those. So I think the important thing for this layer is to make sure we're not building more things than we need to.
Yeah, to actually have sort of a native quality to a network so that it's easy to plug and play, I think is also a cost factor. I think a lot of people need to understand that as you're expanding up your physical environment and your network to join what we're going to talk about next, which is the matrix, which is already here across this industry, you really need to think about costs now, right? So you probably should just go with the, you know, one and done kind of a thing. And I know I'm just complimenting you for a second, Mike, because I know you guys sort of are, you know, from the alpha to the omega on the network thing, right? Like you guys have it all covered, like you were saying. So okay, so let's go up to the matrix. And when you were just talking about the environment, the physical environment. Yes, nice to have a rhythm, nice to get back on campus. And I know there's a lot of students that really feel that way, but there's an equal number of them now from the data on absenteeism that's coming in and the weird sort of rough ride schools are having. There's a lot that aren't coming back. And so there's been this proposition that possibly using AI, particularly spatial temporal AI, we might take that second level, the campus environment, up even higher and put even more traffic on it, which is going to really help schools arrive in the matrix by changing the way they use space and time so that they would be, possibly maybe for a piece of their curriculum or all of it, transition the entire school so that everyone's in homerooms. They're still on the comfy beanbag chairs and sofas, and they've got little desks and areas they can be in. But then that's like a waiting room. And then as they accumulate to points in the curriculum as a small cohort, the network is watching this, then they get flighted out. It's like an airplane arrives and they're now assigned, and the airport has the homeroom has a flight board that says, these 5 names to room 101B for the next, lecture or whatever it is that the teacher's doing for the next 25, 30 minutes. Then they come back, right? So they could be convening from multiple homerooms, but it's going to look very different. The whole traffic to go completely pace-based, but still maintain that familiar social homeroom environment. Huge change, huge increase in traffic. But once we get there, now you also have the capability from a time and space use to use outside educators at will, much easier, and also to be able to have students remote at will and not lose anything if they miss time because they got sick or they had to be absent for some other reason, because it's all pace-based. So if you're gone for a few days, okay, when you come back, you're still at the same point and you still move forward. You still intersect with the same teacher, just maybe in a later cohort of other students who were running behind anyway. So let's talk about this next level up. So we enter this matrix and it needs a lot of intelligence, because I just presented you a very, very fast vision of using tutoring, using outside teachers, because you can't get a math teacher, you're out in the middle of nowhere. So you're sharing one from 3 districts over and you're giving them, maybe your Spanish teacher because you have one there in your little district, but they can't get one over there. Talk to me about what Cisco sees, because you see this world the way I see this world evolving.
Yeah, so you've just beautifully laid out the complexity of the student-based logistics, the faculty-based logistics, and then the physical space logistics. I mean, these are all different puzzle pieces, that need to fit together. What I like, and I'm really excited about this because I think there's a classic curb cut effect that, I think we think about these things for the classic, high achievers or potentially students with learning disabilities, and that's who's going to benefit from any deviation or flexibility that's offered outside of sort of the classic, roll through physical school. And I think when we have that opportunity to not let go, as you described, of the group basis, not bring it down, because we brought it down to the individual. We could probably do all of this. We just brought it down to you're on your own, and maybe you go to a place and maybe you don't, and your stuff. But only, you said it, only so many people learn well that way. Some thrive in that. Some need the group. We need to be learning social skills. There's so much that goes into education beyond just that. The conveyance of academic information and progression. That sparking that curiosity. Encouraging exploration and all those things that go in. So I think what we see is the technology is there, as you said, the technology is there to do it. What it really requires is sort of building out those trusted partners. What is that landscape? Because we have an obligation for the safety of students, we have an obligation for the progression of the students, and so I think what it really requires is building that out. And then how do you integrate systems, which really is just an API level communication among systems. If I'm responsible for a student, whether half of their curriculum is coming out of my core, sitting in a class with a group of peers, and then half of it through the given day is in the types of environments you described. where I'm sitting with some other students, or maybe I am by myself in a cubicle for 1 hour doing one thing that's just very unique me about my day, that I'm able to do all of that, but we're able to still account for them. Are they where they're supposed to be? Are they still on campus and safe? Are they logging in to these classes and submitting and progressing? So all this information needs to feed back into the learning management systems, and needs to happen in near real time, so that we can know that on a regular, day-to-day basis, not, oh, okay, every week, every month, so we kind of get a sense that things are working well. Now we can kind of keep a sense of what they're doing. And this is where the technology comes in. Because if you think about those just few simple things I just articulated, if I had to do all that manually, you would have to hire so much staff to keep track. What would the ratio be, of administrators to students to watch and monitor all that? I don't think it would really be conceivable.
Not possible.
So the idea is
and
the
I think
network.
You hit on something. Go ahead.
Well, I say the network can say where you are. So if you're supposed to be, if I'm supposed to be sitting in a cube because I'm doing something, I'm taking a college level class in real time while during one of my periods in high school, and I'm supposed to be in this space, then the network can say I'm in that space, and that's okay. So it's sort of the same as if I were in a classroom. Attendance is taken every hour to make sure everybody's where they're supposed to be. That can happen naturally and organically, with the technology. And the same thing with the learning management systems integration and the ability to say, hey, the student's enrolled from this school, but in this thing, and then that data can be fed back, right? And that's not something we do specifically, but those API integrations to make sure the data goes to where it needs to be for the proper accountability and visibility into their grades and whatnot. So I think it's that level of technology. The technology is there. We just have to use it and do some of that work at the application layer to really make that possible. And I think there's a crawl, walk, run. When you start building out your partners, as you described, with peer schools, with a local college, certain places where you start to expand that out and do some of that integration work to build that out. But I think what we'll see is, while it may be motivated initially by maybe some use cases around some of the people at the extremes, I think it'll be leveraged by a lot of folks to learn, really, as you said, the best way that works for them. And if it is self-paced, great, that works. The system allows for that. But if it's in an environment together where it's a mix and match, and maybe I progress really fast in one topic, and that's all I need, for is just that one topic. I had my own kids ran out of I had some in small private high school and some in large public high school, but they each ran out of classes in a subject, different subjects each. And it would have been great. They would have loved, they had good options for their education, but it would have been great to say, oh, well, one of the options is I just go and sit over here by myself or with a few other people on the same pace on that topic. And we take a class together. And I think they would have jumped at that.
And I think what you're just really describing here is something that happens to almost every single parent. Every student is unique, right? And what we're experiencing now post-pandemic is understanding that every human is different. We don't have homogeneity in our student population. We don't even want it. We talk about equity all the time, and we're recognizing across all of America, and every school and every teacher has got to try to personalize. They all have these individual education plans for kids. Even colleges are really attempting to really appeal more like a real personal, real homey, it's very different environment. And I only see that happening with advanced logistics, right? I only see that really, really coming home with advanced logistics, which totally 100% depend on the network. But actually, when you take your mind into this, and you were really bringing some color to that, a matrix evolves once there's logistics. You can start doing things like FedEx does. They can get a box anywhere in the world in 24 hours through any number of hubs, right? Their networks just figure that out, right? And so what you're saying is we have a potentiality to use the intelligence of the network to do things like take attendance, yes, this kid was here, or yes, they logged on there, and now we know this, and this is how fast they're proceeding. And there's so much more that a network can do than really a lot of people are thinking with. And because they're not there yet, they're maybe not unburdening their humans as much as they could.
I think that's very fair, very well said. And that, we talk heavily about the student piece, but you bring out the faculty piece. I mean, the faculty shortages as well. And while this may not be the answer, there are many answers. It can definitely be a piece of it. We think about how do we ensure that the faculty and staff that we do have is focused on where we need them, that we wrap the partners you talked about bringing in for perhaps advanced topics or this or that, or efficiency. It's one thing to say, I'm going to take a faculty on an advanced topic and I'm going to stretch them across multiple schools. Well, it's very different if they're leading those classes across multiple schools at the same time versus having to spread those over throughout the day versus having to go to all those places, right? Those are three different layers of efficiency. And we get to the one where it's across and multiple, and then using partners to both expand curriculum, but also fill in for staff gaps. I think that just that level of resilience, that level of flexibility is really needed to optimize with the resources that we have. So I think that it can solve a lot of, or be part of solving a lot of the challenges in education. But I do think that the first and foremost one is, and you as you called it out, is every one of us is different. We learn differently at different paces, different styles, and each of us different paces per topic too. So I only need to be advanced in this. I prefer to study by myself for that. I like to be around people for this other thing. And I don't know the right way to say this, LeiLani, you can teach me. It's either IEPs. IEPs are necessary.
Individual education
IEPs
plans,
are expensive. So could be everyone has an IEP, or there's no need for an IEP because everyone has flexibility. So either way we say it, I think that's the place that we're talking about getting to.
Well, I think really, and I think I've mentioned this to others at Cisco, and I talk about this a lot, obviously, but the reason we have to have IEPs is because we're structured for an age when no one needed them. But now we have cultural expectation of personalization and wraparound because every other industry is doing it, because the network's allowing them to do it. Amazon can get a cold box of ice cream on my front doorstep in under like 4 hours, right? Like you order it while you're at the baseball game with your kid and then it's on your front door. Like literally, that's how good logistics is. And yet we have been still saying to every child in America, at least in K-12, you got to stick with the other 8-year-olds. You got to move along the little, manufacturing line here. Stay with your group, stay on pace. What do you mean you lost 2 weeks because you broke your leg? You got to catch up, right? Like, why are we doing that? Why can't we just adjust the path, right? It's just logistics. It's so simple. It's like, if you have a network, you can do this, right? So let's do it. Let's actually do what technology can actually do to change the structure of education. I get all excited. You can tell when I talk about this, but I want to come back to one other thing, because I think what's holding people back from this vision, from reaching for this, is not just that they've been in this pattern for 250 years. They can't imagine entering this matrix, right? This intelligent matrix that allows them to get a tutor from 3 counties over, or share a teacher out that they themselves just have a share plan with all the 5 districts in their area, and just sort of like explode with creativity. I think what the reason is not that they can't think with it, they couldn't be creative. They're afraid of security. So I think it's really huge that you have a background in that and you can talk about that. So if you were in their shoes, Mike, let's do this to wrap up this particular video cast and podcast. What would you say to them? Like, don't be afraid, or take my hand, or what would you say?
Well, I'll start with it's a team sport, and we're starting to see, I think, more collaboration, not just within education, but across education to government and whatnot. And there's been some things I won't go into, but that have been prompting that intentionally from the federal government, prompting more of that collaboration, which is absolutely needed. If you go back 10 years, cybersecurity wasn't in the top 10 concerns, and not just of administrators, of IT. in security. It made sense because back then you think back, what was the criticality of the resources? Bad actors had far richer targets out there. But fast forward to today, it is the number one concern, and the reason is ransomware by itself. Forget every other security threat that's out there, but even just ransomware is so low effort, so low cost, and it's not just disruptive to the operation of the school and the ability to keep the students safe. And when we see school cancellations,
You mean for the propagators, it's so low cost for
so
them to
low
do
cost
that.
for the propagators. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
easy for them. It's just out there. They're not even targeting anyone. It's just out there
Just
floating
random.
around. And so they're not trying to get into, hack into a school. That's a whole different thing. Ransomware is just out there. And so somebody clicks on it, and it gets in, it does the thing. They're putting so little effort into that. But once it's there, then they have access to data, sensitive data for minors. That's something we have an obligation to protect the data and the systems. But then it's also disruptive as well to school. When we see schools canceled, it's not as much it used to be because we would have trouble educating. Now it's, well, am I going to be able to maintain and manage the safety of everybody on my campus? That's a concern in addition to all the systems up that I need to educate everybody. So we really see, ransomware sort of has crept up and continues to grow. The tools are in place. This is another good place. LeiLani will say the technology is there for the matrix. The technology is there to prevent and protect against ransomware. So that's the beauty. So the thing I would say is play the team sport. Continue to modernize infrastructure. We have to do that to, bring the new wireless in so that we can have a room full of kids doing AR, VR, not just one, So we'll see the technology come along, but same on the security side. The biggest challenges are funding and staffing. Staffing and training, we can certainly help address. And there are programs actually coming in the U.S. Where the FCC is modernizing the E-rate program with a pilot next year, where they're looking towards bringing more funding beyond the classic firewall to some of the cybersecurity capabilities that are really needed. I mentioned earlier, some things like multi-factor authentication, endpoint detection. There's a number of others that I can get into, and we talk about a lot among Cisco. But I would just say, focus on the fundamentals, focus on practicing the tabletop exercises that I described earlier, and play the team sport. If you have an ISAO or a cybersecurity organization in your local area, and then certainly work with your industry partners. That's what we are here to do, is to share best practices, to help you, connect with other people. What have they done? What's worked for them? And we'll help you play that team sport.
Yeah, that's a really great way to look at it. It's a team sport. Yeah, you're not alone out there, Mr. School person, network guy who might have been a former science teacher who was good with drones, and people forgot you could know technology, and then they made you the network guy. And now you're like, what? We could be attacked. We're freaking out. Don't worry, right? Like there's a way for you to play, no matter what size your organization is. And I think, Cisco, you made some good observations, Mike. Play with your partners, like hold hands, go with others.
Absolutely. And part of it is, I've gotten this whole time without saying AI, I don't think at all, which is hard
I
to do
did.
now
I'm
because it's
sorry.
AI, everything's
I'm
AI,
sorry.
AI, AI, AI. And I will say in this area though, Leilani, this is an area where systems in the cloud, leveraging
Hmm.
automation and increasingly artificial intelligence will actually and platforms, we are making security simpler and more effective through that. So this is an actual place where it's not AI hand waving or AI market message anything.
Yeah.
There's reality to that, and you called it for lean staffs, both in the network and in security. Those are absolutely critical in education, and that's
Yeah.
here
Yeah.
today,
Well,
but
yeah.
more coming.
Yeah. If you don't have the people, you have to get outsiders, which is another way you're joining the matrix, right? Mike, can you just explain visibility for a second?
Sure, and I'll try to keep it too close to a second, Leilani. So visibility, because words matter and mean a lot of things to a lot of people. And I'll start from the basics. Like, it's just being able to see the environment that you're operating within. And classically, that was just the network that a school operated in. You showed up, even when you had a device, and you were tapping into a system that's right there. Maybe you went off to the internet every now and then, but again, as we said earlier, wasn't necessary. Now we're spread out. We're using applications out in the cloud. We've got users going everywhere, students everywhere, faculty everywhere, and all around. And so now to have visibility, I need to be able to see out to the internet. I don't know if everybody realizes that that is possible today. It's possible a number of different ways, but the way we do it from Cisco is a solution called Thousand Eyes, and we leverage the network hardware. We leverage the collaborative endpoints that hanging on the wall in the classroom, endpoint security software sitting on devices that are moving around with the users, our collaboration systems in the cloud, and then agents in all the major cloud providers. So we can literally show, here's how the internet is performing, here how these educational applications are accessible and available. And if you have a user or as a student that all the way down to the device and the Wi-Fi and the broadband in the house is having an issue, that can be seen and noted that, hey, that's not going to work. For that student, that experience is not going to be possible to be delivered. And you see that versus having to guess at what's going on with that student or having a person. So all that data is right there. So that's our foundational visibility on the network. And then from there, we can take the concept up to what's now being called full stack observability, which is sort of visibility across everything. You start thinking about visibility of all applications, their interactions, security, correlating data across different elements, all the places where the bad actors try to kind of find their way in between, different detection systems and different security solutions. So there's a bigger concept of visibility, but I think for this audience, I think just that foundational visibility of everywhere that they're operating, I think is probably the most important.
Well, what's really exciting when you explaining that to me? Here's what I saw. I actually saw the movie The Matrix in my mind for a second. I saw
See all
I
the
saw,
numbers and
as
the
you were
ones and
explaining
zeros.
it, I saw the little, no, I actually saw the little tiny little fly bots and bug bots, right? That they have in the movie. And maybe I'm confusing it with one of the animated movies. But anyway, they go up and down and they like surveil, is what I'm saying. They go around and they look at everything, check everything, da 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 da. Is that kind of like what you're saying?
I think it is, and I think we have a saying that whatever you connect, you need to protect, and you can't protect what you can't see. And so when we think about this whole sort of interaction of uh, availability of the system and then how security feeds into that. I think, yeah, having those bug bots that are out there everywhere that you
Yeah.
need them to be, but without you having to put a bunch of effort in because you're leveraging componentry that you've already put into place to then give you that data. It kind of goes back to that: don't build another network, don't buy another system to just do that one thing. Leverage what you
Yeah.
have, and then you're just going to get that value, additional value from it.
Cool. Cool. Like it. So really, I think what I'm experiencing, as we've talked about to this all today, is that we titled this The Education Intelligent Network Matrix is already here. It is here. It's just, let's all be willing to join hands, reach out, partner, find the companies that can do this for us, enable ourselves to be more than ourselves, enable ourselves to take away some of the hard labor of our staff by using technology in that way. I know I read an article today. I'm not going to say where it was or what magazine it was in or whose it was because I might embarrass them. It wasn't me. It wasn't the Learning Council News Media. But it's essentially was saying, technology's like, I don't know if it's going to be the whole savior of education. Education is really, really struggling right now. I disagree because we haven't actually seen technology really move past just, let's talk about it at the curriculum level. Let's talk about it as something nifty. You and I are talking about it as a game changer level, taking this entire industry into the matrix. And really, that's our message today. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think technology by itself will ever be that thing, but the technology, the way we're talking about it today, will absolutely change what we are able to do with the human connection that is the magic. And so I think it's just continuing to transform the human magic of educators and students doing what
Mhm.
they do best and sparking that humanity and that curiosity and exploration in all of us. And there's absolutely much, much, much more left that we're going to be able to do, but a lot that we can do today, which is exciting.
Yeah, yeah, I think we hit a lot of really good points. So this has been such a joy to have you, Mike.
It's
I'm
been
really glad
fun.
we met. Yeah, thank you. All right. And thank you for listening to another episode of the Learning Leadership Society's podcast. This has been your host, LeiLani Cawthon. Keep listening, keep learning.